Welcome. Today, we undertake a scholarly exploration into a very specific philosophical current, one that has flowed beneath the surface of Western history for millennia. We're going to trace a profound narrative, a story of the soul's journey, from what these traditions describe as a form of cosmic imprisonment, all the way to its ultimate reunification with the divine. Our examination will follow a logical progression. First, we'll need to define what we mean by hidden knowledge. Then we'll delve into the fundamental problem that this knowledge seeks to address. From there, we'll uncover the master key to its resolution, outline the practical path of transformation, and finally, we will contemplate the ultimate aim of this entire spiritual endeavor, the state of what is called the perfect human. So let's begin at the beginning. Before we can understand the path, we must first understand the very nature of the knowledge that illuminates it. What does esotericism truly signify? The word itself, esotericism, comes from the Greek for within, and that's really the key. It refers to a body of knowledge considered too profound, or perhaps too easily misconstrued, to be made public. This wisdom isn't for mass consumption. It's reserved for an inner circle, a select group of initiates who are prepared to receive it. It's passed down directly from master to student in a protected lineage. This stands in stark contrast to exoteric knowledge, the public doctrines of religion and philosophy that are accessible to everyone.
So, what is the central argument of these hidden teachings? First, that the universe is not a random accident. It possesses a fundamental purpose, a maksat, and that purpose is the spiritual evolution, the tekamul, of the human soul. This isn't a physical evolution, but a spiritual one, with a very specific goal: to achieve the state of kamil insan, the perfect or complete human. And once perfected, the soul is prepared to reunite with its divine source. But, and this is crucial, this entire cosmic process is understood not through the cold, hard lens of the intellect, but through the unifying force of what is called ashk, or divine love.
Now, here is perhaps the most audacious claim of the esoteric worldview. It posits a single, unified historical thread, a golden chain of transmission. It argues that all these seemingly separate groups, scattered across time and geography, were in fact guardians of the very same primordial tradition. This lineage is said to stretch back to the mists of time, to a mythical brotherhood on the lost continent of Mu, continuing through Atlantis, into the historical mystery schools of Egypt and Greece, and then re-emerging in the mystical branches of the Abrahamic faiths, Sufism and Kabbalah, and in secretive orders like the Knights Templar, before culminating in the Rosicrucians, alchemists, and Freemasons of the modern era. So, if the purpose of existence is evolution toward perfection, that implies we are starting from a state of imperfection. Before you can speak of liberation, you must first diagnose the nature of the prison. And these traditions do just that, offering a view of the human condition that is both metaphysical and deeply psychological.
This modern quote from Jim DeCorn frames the problem in a stark contemporary way. Life is just a serotonin hallucination. Let's pause on that. The statement suggests that what we call reality is not an objective truth, but a biochemical construct. Our consciousness is, in a sense, locked within the limits of our neurochemistry, experiencing a carefully curated sliver of existence that we mistake for the whole. This idea has ancient roots, particularly in the Gnostic worldview. For the Gnostics, the fundamental human dilemma is this: a divine spark, a fragment of pure spirit, has fallen into and become entrapped within the material world. This world of matter, which they called Hayal, is seen not as our true home, but as a foreign and restrictive dimension. The physical body and the material universe itself is therefore a cage for the divine light trapped within us. And we find a fascinating modern parallel in the work of transpersonal psychologist Stanislav Grof. His research into non-ordinary states of consciousness led him to believe that the trauma of our own biological birth creates a deep blueprint for our later psychological suffering. He identified a specific stage, which he calls Basic Perinatal Matrix II, or BPM II. This corresponds to the point in labor where uterine contractions are at their peak, but the cervix is still closed. The subjective experience of this, he found, is a feeling of no exit, a state of absolute hopelessness, cosmic abandonment, and what feels like an eternity of entrapment. Grof calls this the psyche's first encounter with a seemingly infinite and inescapable suffering, a kind of ontological hell. Now, the Gnostic tradition takes this concept of a prison and personifies its wardens. They speak of immaterial entities they call Archons, who act as the guardians of this material realm. In this framework, the Archons aren't just passive guards. They are described as parasitic intelligences that have a vested interest in maintaining the prison. Why? Because they are said to feed on the low-frequency emotional energy generated by unenlightened humanity, our fear, our despair, our suffering. This table provides a powerful synthesis, showing how these different models converge on the same core truth. Look here. Grof's psychological model defines the prison as the closed uterine system, the experience as no exit, and the spiritual result as a profound sense of nihilism and despair. Decorn's Gnostic model sees the prison as the entire 3D space-time continuum, the experience as energetic parasitism, and the result as a loss of life force. And Whitehead's zodiacal model describes the prison through mathematical law, an endless repeating cycle that produces what he calls the imperfect human. You have psychological, mystical, and astrological language, all pointing to the same fundamental state of entrapment. So we have thoroughly defined the prison. The question then is inescapable. Is there a key? Is there a way out? According to the Hermetic tradition, the answer is yes, and the key is not a thing, but a principle, a single axiom that unlocks the doors from the inside. This is the master key. This short, profound statement comes from the Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus, a foundational text of all Western esotericism. As above, so below. It is presented not as a piece of poetry, but as the fundamental operating principle of the cosmos. It is the key to liberation. What does this axiom actually mean? It posits a fundamental correspondence, a mirror-like reflection between all planes of existence. It means that the human being, the microcosm or small world, is a perfect holographic reflection of the entire universe, the macrocosm or great world. This is a radical reframing. The universe is no longer a vast, external, unknowable place. The entire pattern of the cosmos is contained within the human soul, and therefore, the path to understanding the universe begins and ends with understanding oneself. This principle of correspondence is what gives rise to the path of gnosis, a word that means direct, experienced knowledge. The logic follows like this. If the universe is an emanation of a divine mind, or nous, and if our soul is a spark of that very same mind, then the problem is not that the world is evil, but simply that we are in a state of ignorance. We have forgotten our divine origin. Therefore, liberation isn't found through second-hand belief or blind faith. It is achieved by awakening our own innate, intuitive wisdom, Sophia, which leads to that direct knowledge, that gnosis. The external struggle becomes an internal journey, encapsulated perfectly by the ancient command, know thyself. So, if self-knowledge is the key, how does one turn it in the lock? What does the actual journey look like? The esoteric traditions are not just abstract philosophy. They provide structured, practical methodologies for this journey of transformation, this path of return. We often see this process described through powerful metaphors. Spiritual alchemy, for instance, views the unevolved soul as base metal, like lead. The spiritual work is a process of transmutation, turning that lead into the gold of an enlightened spirit. The alchemical formula for this is solve it coagula, dissolve and coagulate. You must dissolve the false conditioned self, the ego, in order to then coagulate or reform the true divine self. Mystical theology uses the language of the heart. It describes the same journey as one of purification and ascension, but it is guided and powered by that all-consuming divine love, or ashk. For a more concrete map, we can look to the 12th century Jewish mystic Bachya ibn Pekuda. He laid out a remarkably clear 10-step path of inner work. It's a progressive ladder. It begins with the intellect, accepting divine unity, then contemplating creation to see that unity in action. It then moves to purifying one's will and actions through obedience, trust, sincerity, and humility. The work then turns deeply inward through repentance and rigorous self-examination. And only after clearing that inner ground can one truly practice asceticism, renouncing the superfluous, which finally opens the heart to the 10th and final station, achieving the love of God. And this brings us to the culmination of the entire path. We have examined the prison, found the key, and walked the path of return. Where does it all lead? What is the final destination of this great journey? The endpoint is the realization of the chameleon son, the perfect or complete human. Now, it is absolutely essential to understand that this does not refer to a superhuman with magical powers. Rather, it describes a fully actualized human being, someone who has completed the journey of spiritual evolution, takamul, who has purified their soul, transcended the illusions of the material world, and has achieved a conscious, continuous state of unity with the divine source. What defines this perfected state? It is the end of the soul's long exile. The sense of separation dissolves. This individual has realized, not as a belief, but as a living fact, that love is the fundamental law of existence. From this vantage point, all public exoteric religions are seen as valuable tools, perhaps story collections, designed to guide the soul. But they are rungs on a ladder that must eventually be transcended for direct experience. The perfect human operates from this state of pure gnosis and as a result embodies a true universal humanism because they recognize that same divine spark within every single being.
And in the end, this entire intricate philosophical structure can be distilled down into 4 beautifully simple statements, said to be the most ancient formulation from the Nalakal Brotherhood. In these 4 lines, we have the entire narrative arc we've just explored. 1. There is a single divine source. 2. The soul is immortal, but its vehicle, the body, is temporary. 3. The soul undergoes a long journey of evolution through many incarnations until it achieves perfection. And 4. The perfected soul returns to its source and becomes one with it.
And so we conclude with this question. The esoteric traditions, in all their varied forms, propose one simple, radical idea, that the greatest of all explorations is not outward to the stars, but inward to the soul. That the map of the cosmos and the key to our own liberation lies waiting within each of us. Thank you for joining this explainer.